started, hello everyone. My name is Bethany Sen, and I'm a member of the ADSA Graduate Student Division Professional Development Committee. And we were able to ask Dr. Harmon to be our speaker today, and we thank him very much for his time. For those of you who don't know Dr. Harmon, he is a professor emeritus at the University of Kentucky. He received his BS and MS degrees in dairy science at the from Ohio State University, and his PhD in veterinary microbiology and immunology from the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. He has been on the faculty at the University of Kentucky since 1979, where he maintained an active and productive research and outreach program that focused on mastitis microbiology, pathophysiology, milk quality, and mastitis control for over 20 years, which resulted in 71 peer-reviewed publications, 11 books and chapters, and over 110 invited presentations across the world. He is author of one of the most cited papers on factors affecting somatic cell counts in milk. Bob was active in ADSA and National Mastitis Council committees and served as NMC president. He was a recipient of the ADSA West Agro Award, Outstanding Advisor Award, Southern ADSA Honor Award, ADSA Fellow Award, and the National Mastitis Council Award of Excellence. He served as department chair for the University of Kentucky for 14 years with administrative and budgetary responsibilities for teaching, research, and extensive programs. He retired in 2016, but still enjoys serving on graduate committees and consulting with students, dairy faculty, and dairy industry professionals such as ourselves. So it's a great honor to have Dr. Harmon with us, and with his many, many years of experience, I think we're all going to be able to learn something. So he will speak for about 45 minutes, and we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Harmon to begin his presentation.
Thank you very much, Bethany. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today, and welcome everybody. As you can see, I'm going to give some of my insights into job interviews and negotiating job offers, and hopefully there's something that each of you can take away from this today that'll help you in the future. Just to give you a bit of an idea, if I can get my PowerPoint to advance. Yeah. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, although Bethany mentioned some of my background, I had 36.5 years experience as a faculty member, so I have that perspective, and then a little over 14 years as department chair. Over that period of time, I hired about 12 faculty, which means we interviewed 36 to 40 candidates over that period of time. So I'm giving you my perspective and experience on dealing with those types of interviews. I also mentored numerous faculty on career paths throughout their time on our faculty, guided faculty through the promotion and tenure process, and I also had oversight of departmental staff hires, so I might mention that a little bit during my presentation. I also either chaired or served on search committees for a variety of college positions, including some associate dean positions. So that's the direction that I come from, or the perspective I come from. My presentation today, I want to give a brief introduction and talk a little bit about qualities that we look for in candidates in general, a bit on the resumes, which is important. Then I'm going to talk about what should you do before the interview. In other words, preparation becomes really critical in this whole process, so we'll talk about that. Next, what to expect during the interview, either from academic or industry position perspective, and then after the job interview. So how do you deal with a job offer and negotiations? And we'll give a little bit of insight into there. As I mentioned, my approach today is going to be either from academic or an industry position perspective, and they're a little bit different in how they may come about, but there are some very common types of information that you need to know going into either type of a position. Over the years, I've seen a number of different surveys that have been done, particularly in the agricultural industry. I think it's always interesting to me to look at what potential employers look for in a candidate. And some of these might surprise you, but this first slide kind of gives the highest priority according to those surveys. First of all, they look for excellence in communication skills, and that includes both verbal and writing skills. From a verbal perspective, of course, that could include conversations on the phone, in-person conversations, and presentation skills. And I'm sure most of you have received a lot of experience in giving presentations, either in courses or going to professional meetings and so forth. But the conversational skill is also very important, especially when you get into interviews. Writing skills includes writing letters, emails, reports, journal articles, etc. But I want to come back to the letter writing and email writing. Oftentimes we tend to use a lot of abbreviations and shortened sentences and so forth when we're emailing, and it even gets more so when we talk about texting. But I encourage you to consider, when you're in an interview or a job hunting situation, keep those emails very professional. Of course, a letter should be professional, but keep those emails professional as well, because that's a reflection of you. And believe it or not, when search committees are looking at resumes and they look at the cover letter that may come in and even email conversation that went on, they're going to pick up on everything that you say in those. So keep that in mind, and again, keep professionalism in mind. Second of all, people skills. And by that I mean your ability to work with diverse groups or in teams. And you may have been involved in teamwork in some of your courses and so forth, but when it comes to a job situation, it's pretty likely that at some point in time you're going to have to work in a team environment. In industry, that may be a big portion of your job, where you're part of a team, so to speak. On faculty positions, we do a lot of things individually, but you will also be on committees and other team-type work where you contribute to the team as a whole. Thirdly, problem-solving skills. And these are not necessarily in exact order, although communication skills tends to be at the top of the list in a lot of these surveys of what potential employers look for. Problem-solving skills or analytical skills is kind of self-evident here. In other words, in any job, you're going to come up against challenges and problems that you need to solve either individually or as a group. So they're looking at that kind of a skill. Strong work ethic is pretty evident, I would say. Leadership or potential for leadership, and I'll talk about this a little bit when I mention resumes. We, as potential employers, we're looking for people that have had leadership experience. So whether that's been in an organization like the Graduate Student Division of ADSA, or whether it's an in-department type committee, maybe you chaired, or clubs or various organizations, don't forget to put down those types of leadership opportunities that you've been involved in. So these tend to be some of the top items that are looked for based on surveys. And it's interesting to me that when you look at competency in your field, oftentimes that falls down lower than some of these other qualities that I just mentioned. If we're going to hire a faculty member, obviously we need somebody who is competent in their field, but a lot of times we tend to focus on that being a primary item, but these other personal qualities are very important. We'd like to see somebody that's confident, and obviously we want people that are honest, and flexibility is also a very important trait in the job world. And I say that because I've known professionals out in the industry that may have worked for the same company, so to speak, most of their career, but that company changed names 3 or 4 times over their career. And as name changes occur, a lot of times their job responsibilities may change. So having that flexibility and being able to adapt to change, it's a trait that can be very important in your career. Determination and persistence. I really like to see that in an employee, but you notice I did not say hard-headedness. Okay, there's a difference between being hard-headed and being determined and persistent in your job. By determination and persistence, I'm looking at you don't give up, okay? You keep going and address challenges as they come about, and every job is going to have its challenges. Last, evidence of grantsmanship for faculty positions is something that we would look for. Obviously, as a graduate student, you may not have a chance to go out and get grants per se, but some of you might have been involved in a grant writing process, or you may have done that as part of a qualifying exam or whatever. So if you have any type of experience like that, that's good, and make sure you get it on your resume. So talking about the resume, how important is the resume? Well, it's pretty darn important because it may mean the difference between getting an interview or not getting an interview. And a resume basically tells your story. It tells your background from an educational standpoint, as well as any experience you've had job-wise, and also skills. Most likely this is going to be used in the initial screening process. So, you know, a group or individuals are going to sit down and they're going to compare resumes, you know, and what's the best fit for the position for which they want to interview. So do not sell short the importance of the resume. And when do you start building a resume? Well, obviously now, okay? Actually, when you're an undergraduate is a good time to start building that resume, but certainly as a graduate student, you look at various things that we'll talk about here in a moment and start building that resume as soon as possible. When you're putting together that resume, now is not the time to be modest, okay? You want to make sure you include and get credit for all those things that you have been involved in. But as I said here on this slide, be honest about it. Keep in mind you're trying to sell yourself, but avoid the fluff. And so what do I mean by fluff? In other words, do not embellish beyond what the particular item actually is. Okay? Make sure you list a particular expertise or a skill. Make sure, you know, all of your papers and written materials are included in there, but don't make it look greater than it is. And I'll come back and mention something about that in a moment. This first item on this list, no typos, no spelling or grammatical errors. You would be surprised, perhaps, at how people scrutinize a resume, and when they see a lot of errors on it, they believe that that reflects on the individual. So you want to make sure it's free of errors, okay? Also, all information should match. And by that I mean, typically you would write a cover letter when you apply for a job. So you may list, you know, certain dates, say dates you'll complete your master's or dates you complete your dissertation, and make sure whatever you say in that letter also matches what's in the resume or your CV. There may be a reference to attending meetings and giving a presentation, and those may be, you know, two different listings that you happen to have in a resume. Those should match. It should be the same year, and sometimes a typo in there can really throw off the reader, that they don't understand exactly which item is true. So, again, have somebody proofread it, you proofread it, and have a second person proofread it so that you don't have any type of typographical errors in there. So the resume clearly and concisely tells your story. Obviously, it includes your name and contact information, but I caution you, you may have 2 phone numbers and 2 email addresses. Put the one that you want to be contacted at. as a person, I'm trying to contact somebody that I want to invite in for an interview. I don't want 5 different contact items listed in there. I want to know where can I find you, and I want to know the email address and the phone number. So keep that in mind. Obviously, you list your current status, your educational history, competencies and skills. And again, I come back to don't embellish beyond what's real. For example, if you used a piece of software in a particular course and you used it one time, I would not exactly call that an accomplished skill. So only put those skills in there that you really feel comfortable with and have truly accomplished. Job experience is an obvious thing too also. And also, dates. Dates on job experience and educational history. Make sure those dates are correct. I've seen resumes in which they had a projected completion date that was listed in the resume, say completing their PhD, and yet that's not the date that they talked about in their cover letter. So, don't confuse people. You would list any publications, abstracts, or other writings. Make sure you also list all authors in the order in which they appeared on that particular publication. Again, include presentations with the date at which it was presented, any grants and contracts that you might have been involved in, certainly recognition awards, leadership roles, offices held, committees. And again, stop and think about these things that you've done through your graduate career or in your undergraduate career. Make sure you put those evidences of leadership in there. Any professional organizations to which you belong, community service and outreach. If you've been involved in extension-related work at your institution or maybe youth-related work, make sure you include that in some section that may be community service or outreach. In some cases, some graduate students have extensive experience and may have given a number of extension-related presentations. Make sure that gets in the resume. And then, of course, your references, and make sure that contact information for all those references is, in fact, current. So you've applied for a job, and you, in fact, have been granted an interview. So how do you prepare for it? In my mind, this is a close second to the actual interview itself. Now, let me go through what I feel is important in preparing for an interview. And I spend some time on this because, like I said, in my career as an administrator, I've probably interviewed at least 40 different candidates, if not more than that, just for faculty positions and any number of positions that were staff-related positions. And I can tell when people come in and they're not prepared. Unfortunately, it becomes evident. And that can mean the difference between getting an offer and not. So my first item is do your homework. Find out as much as possible about the department or the organization. It doesn't mean you become an expert on them necessarily and then go in the interview and tell them all about themselves, but it sets the stage. For industry positions, if you know someone out there in the industry, talk to them about the process they went through. Or maybe a recent graduate student went through some interviews. Talk with them. Talk to other people who have gone through the experience. Especially for a faculty position, get to know the personnel at that institution and their expertise so that at least you have an idea of what you're going into and you have an idea of the breadth of knowledge that's present there. And you won't be surprised necessarily by names. You may not know their face, but that's fine. But get to know as much as you can. I frankly have been very impressed by several of the candidates that we had brought in the past about how much they knew about what was going on in the department, and that was a real positive. Get to know what programs exist maybe for a company, what products produced, etc. Now, I'll have to say, it may be more difficult to do a web search on a company and find out the actual people that are there, because many companies typically do not post information about their employees. But for faculty positions, for universities, you know, we have a full directory. Every department out there, a dairy department, an animal science department, has a directory on the web with their faculty members. So it won't be as difficult to get to know about them. For industry, it'll be more of a challenge. I put in bold here, work with your mentor. In every step of the process, it's critical that you work with your mentor. Don't try to do it all by yourself. They can give you a lot of advice, be a sounding board for you. This person may be your advisor. That would be a logical person. It could be the chair of the department. As a former chair, I had a lot of students before their interviews come down and talk to me after I stepped down from the chair position. Say, hey, will you chat with me? And I would give them my opinion. It could be another faculty member that you're close to in the department. But work with a mentor. Develop and practice your seminar, if in fact you're going to give one. The seminar should be well polished, should stay within the time limit, and make sure you address the topic that they requested. That may sound rather silly, but unfortunately I've seen candidates come in, gave a seminar, but never addressed a particular topic that we asked them to address. So make sure you're clear on what they want you to give. For a research position, you know, typically you come in, give a little bit about your background and your interest, and then go through, you know, your data, much like you give at a professional meeting. But, you know, if it were an extension position, they may ask you to give an extension-related presentation as though you were giving one to dairy producers or something such as that. So make sure you're clear on what they want. Next, I say make sure you get an itinerary in advance. I'll talk about, you know, what an interview looks like in a moment, but it's important that you get the itinerary so that you have an idea, you're not surprised by the whole process. It's good to know, and hopefully it would list some of the people you'll meet with, so you could, you know, do a little bit of homework perhaps on those individuals as well. But having that itinerary in advance and then you going through that a couple times before you arrive at your site can be helpful. Also, part of your homework is, what questions should I ask? Keep in mind that although the institution or company is interviewing you, you are also interviewing them. And it's always been my thought that I want to make a good impression to the candidate as well. So I've listed some potential questions here. Obviously, these are just to stimulate your thinking. You know, you can sit down with your mentor and maybe think of others. But I may comment on some questions not to ask as well. So if you're going to interview for a faculty position at a university, ask them, what are the expectations for promotion and tenure, P&T, promotion and tenure? That'll give you an idea of, you know, what do I need to do to be promoted down the road? Are there opportunities for collaboration? You know, from a research perspective, it's really helpful and it's very nice going into a research position that you also have your independent research area, and there may be things that you can address as a collaborator. So, you know, get that information from the people you visit with. Where's your workstation? What lab facilities would you have available? Are there support staff available? Get an idea of how that department operates. You could ask someone to describe their research dairy facilities and how you could use them. It's not the same at every institution on how those research opportunities are set up. In other words, do you go in and meet with a committee who oversees the unit? Do you go and talk to the dairy manager on what study I want to do? Do I have to have grant dollars up front before I ever start a research project at the dairy? Those are some things that you would want to know. The next item could be the top item on the list, so to speak. What is your DOE? That is distribution of effort. Before you accept a position, you better know what the expectations are. For example, is it 75% research, 25% instruction, 90% extension, 10% instruction? If it's an extension position, are there research expectations associated with it? Get an idea of what that breakout is, because more than likely that is how you're evaluated and what expectations you would have to meet for promotion and tenure. After you've been interviewing for a while, you could ask one of the faculty, could you describe the departmental culture? In other words, how do people interact and on a daily basis? Do people tend to interact a lot? Do people tend to work independently a lot? They would know what you mean when you ask them to describe departmental culture. The last item here, I talked about health coverage and retirement program, which are, part of the benefits package. Some experts in the field say you should not ask about benefits on a first interview. Frankly, as a department chair, I had no problem with that, and we tried to provide that information when a candidate came in, just because it's standard for the university. So that may be helpful to them before they leave the interview. So what if this is an industry position, or as I say, a non-faculty position at a university, a staff position, for example, or it could be a lecturer position, something sort of that could be a lab tech, something that's a non-faculty position. Well, here's some questions. What does a typical day look like for your position that you're interviewing for? To me, that would be a very logical one and a good one to have answered. And that kind of sets the discussion going on, okay, well, what does this position involve? What sort of training would I receive? How is performance measured? What's the most challenging aspect of the job? I think these are all fair and logical questions. You could ask, one of the existing employees, what's your favorite thing about working here? And that's something that I would like to have an answer to if I were going into a company or potentially going into a company. Also, where do you see the company in 3 to 5 years? All companies have goals that they're going toward, and that would give you an idea of where they see that company moving in the coming years. Would there be opportunities to advance in the future? To me, that's a fair question, and it shows, someone has an interest in bettering themselves on the job. And lastly, before you would leave, that interview, what are the next steps in the process? So once you get done with that interview, what are the next steps? So those are all fair and potential questions. You could add to those, but hopefully this gives you some ideas. So you've gotten a call and they want to bring you in for the interview. And are you ready? Well, hopefully with some of the suggestions that I've made here, and if you've done your homework, in fact, you're ready to come in and go through this process. So what's this interview involve? First of all, first impressions are critical. And I ask the question, do you know how long it takes an employer to determine if you fit, or you're a good fit as a future employee? So how long does a first impression really take? Well, if you look at the experts in the field, they say about 7 seconds. About 7 seconds to make a first impression. And by definition, you only make one first impression, I believe. So, although that may scare you a little bit or set you back a little bit, keep that in mind. So, how do you make that good first impression? Well, the next bullet point, obviously, you should dress professionally and have a professional appearance. And even though the workplace at which you're interviewing may have casual dress policy, it's better for you to be overdressed than underdressed. No off-color or crude language. No matter what language is used by others during the interview process, you keep it professional. Coming back to the first impression idea too, simple things such as making sure you shake the hands of the people that let's say you walk into a conference room and there's 5 people around the table, shake everybody's hand and introduce yourself, or they will introduce themselves to you. Have a smile on your face. Seem enthused. On down this bullet list, be prepared to discuss what you bring to the position. Obviously, they're interviewing you for a reason, but sell your strengths. What do you bring to the position? In fact, that's one of the key questions I would usually ask a candidate is, you know, what do you bring to the position? You know, why should we hire you? Make sure you continue to show your interest and excitement. Yes, you may get tired because it's a pretty hectic process sometimes, especially with faculty positions, but continue to show your interest and excitement. Why are you interested in the position? Be prepared for that question. Why are you a good fit for the position? And those are 2 different questions. So stop and think to yourself, why did I apply for this? Why does this interest me so much? And why would I be a good fit? And again, we've gone through some questions you could ask. So ask questions. By your asking questions, it shows your level of interest and excitement about the position. And again, we're talking about position. We're not talking about salary and benefits, okay? Your focus should be on the position. And I specifically say, do not start with a salary question. That throws up a red flag immediately, because that shows that, well, my real interest is how much you're going to pay me, not in the job. Especially when we're hiring in faculty members, we want them to be interested in the position and what they can bring to it and how they can be successful. And, you know, salary and benefits are a different issue. Be cautious with the use of humor in presentations or conversations. And I just say that as a warning because you never know how a joke will go over. As simple as it may be, some people may take it the wrong way, so just avoid it. Also, be careful what you posted on social media. You might as well assume that your future employer has checked out what you posted on social media. You might as well just assume that. Don't burn your bridges. By that, I simply mean keep the interview process professional and cordial. Try to make a good impression. Even if you're not offered the position, let those individuals that you talked with have a good impression of you, even though it might not be the best fit for that job. The reason I say don't burn your bridges is because you never know when people you talk to at this interview may come back in your life somewhere down the road. I've given our students a very simple example. When I was in graduate school, I had a PhD student who was a TA for my course, in an animal breeding course. And it was a good relationship. Everything went fine. Years later, we hired that person into our department, and he became a coworker of mine. A few years down the road, I became that person's boss. And when I became chair of the department, you just never know how your paths are going to cross again, and it happens more frequently than what you might believe. So leave that interview at least leaving a good impression, and don't burn those bridges. At the end of the interview process, certainly ask what's the next step, and that may come, you know, at some point in time naturally in the process. But I leave you with this, you know, these thoughts. Just be professional, be professional, be professional in the whole process. So what does an interview process or format actually look like? For a university faculty position, it's likely about a 2 full days process, a very intense itinerary. You can expect 1 or 2 seminars depending on the position. For example, we've gone to a process where if it's a research teaching position, we'll have them give 1 research position, 1 teaching position. But more than likely, you're going to give at least 1 seminar. You meet with search committee, other faculty in the department, the chair of the department. You might meet with the dean, associate deans, or other administrators. So you're meeting with a lot of people. And don't be surprised that you'll get the same question quite a few times during the days you're there. And I would suggest that if possible, meet with the graduate students, because they can provide a lot of good information to you about how the department actually works. And I love meeting with students, and that's always a good opportunity to take advantage of. You'll likely have a tour of facilities. That would include, you know, where your office is, classrooms that you have access to, research lab, and the lab that you might have, and other labs, and certainly the farm operations. All of those would be part of a tour, hopefully. And then you may have an exit interview with the chair of the department or whoever the hiring official is, where the next steps can be reviewed. So it's an intense process, but if you've done your preparation, again, it can be a really good and beneficial process. With an industry position, it's very difficult to actually say this is the format, because each company may have their standard format. It could be a phone interview or interviews followed by a video conference or a live interview. It could be 1 hour long to a couple days. I've actually seen some doctoral students that went in with a company and they sat down, they met with the CEO for 1 to 2 hours, and that was the entire interview. But chances are it's going to be a little bit longer than that. You may or may not be asked to give a seminar. It depends on the position. If you're going to become a research, or you're interviewing for a research coordinator or something like that, they may have you give a seminar, but in other cases they don't. But they're looking at all these characteristics that we talked about earlier on. You might meet with a CEO, division directors or department directors, other officials. Again, it's going to vary a lot depending on that company's format. Companies will tend to focus on your personal potential. In other words, what can you add to the team that already exists, rather than necessarily you pursuing your research emphasis. So again, the perspective there is going to be a little bit different. What can you bring to the team? And therefore, the way that interview comes about may differ a bit from, you know, what you're used to in a university setting. So you get the phone call and you've been offered the job and quoted a salary offer. Now what? Well, again, keep it cordial, and even if in these negotiations somehow you decide not to take that position, make a good impression. First, I would say express your appreciation and excitement for the position and for the offer. For a faculty position, you need to ask them, when do they need an answer? Because chances are you're not going to give them the answer on the phone right at that moment. It's possible, but probably not. You can ask them, is the salary negotiable? It could be their best offer that they've given you. If it's not negotiable and that's their best offer, they will tell you. And I would ask that you be upfront with them too. If you have another position elsewhere that you're considering, let them know that. Be honest about it, and let's keep all the conversation up front. It's possible with universities that there's little flexibility due to budget lines, due to salary equity issues, college policy, et cetera. But they'll let you know if in fact that's the only offer they can give. Then there may be a startup package with research positions, and that's usually a dollar amount. And from that, you would buy any necessary equipment that doesn't already exist, your office setup, operating expense. You would like to know how long are funds available as well. For example, if you have 3 years to spend those dollars as opposed to 1 year, that's a big advantage. But you'd want to know up front how long those funds are available. And like I said, the startup package probably ends up being some dollar figure. And in some institutions, they pretty much have, this is a standard startup. Do they offer relocation expenses? Is there technical support available, or do you have to pay technical support out of those startup funds? You'd want to know what lab space is available if it's a research position. Also, is there a professional travel allowance for you to go to national meetings, et cetera? And the benefits package will be standard for the university, but understand what those are. And lastly, I say, make sure you discuss this with your mentor. Don't try to do all of this by yourself. With an industry position, again, pretty much a similar type of approach initially, but let them know you're excited, thank them for the interview and for this offer, find out when they would need an answer. You also ask them, is the salary negotiable? If it's an entry-level position, they may have little flexibility, but they will usually tell you, okay? If this is the only offer, hopefully they will tell you up front that that's the case. Consider a good offer for what it is. For some positions, industry tends to pay more than what universities do. For a PhD coming out of the university, you might make more in industry than you would at a university, and you need to understand that. Hopefully, you're looking at academia because of your passion to want to be a faculty member. But from an industry offer, if it's a really good offer and you're very happy or think you'd be very happy with that company, you may not choose to go through lengthy negotiations, but they will probably tell you whether or not the salary is negotiable. You'd want to ask about relocation expenses. Do you operate from an expense account, have a cell phone, an opportunity to attend professional meetings? What's the potential training program that you would go through? Many industries will, in fact, train you once you're on the job. You might want to know the amount of travel versus in-office time. Are there times you would work from home? Again, that varies with the job type and the company. And the benefits package will probably be standard for the company, so that's not really a negotiable factor. And then come back again and discuss this with your mentor and make sure you get back with them within the period of time that they require. So I'm going to wrap this up, and hopefully if you have questions, I will try to answer them. You know, I hope there's some helpful hints in here that you can utilize. But my final word is that interviews can be stressful, there's no doubt. But very important for you to be well prepared up front, and it can make the process fun, but it'll definitely be a learning experience. And I wish you the best of luck going forward when you get into this position. I will say is don't get discouraged if you don't get the first job. If you're not offered the job from the first interview. Back when I first applied for faculty positions, I think I applied for 4 different faculty positions at 4 different institutions. Did not get the job offer on the first interview, and then I had a second interview and ended up working at UK the rest of my career. But keep working at it, and best of luck to you, and if you have questions, if we have time, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Harmon. Again, if you joined us a little bit later, if you do have questions, please type them in the Q&A box below, and I will read them aloud for the group to hear. So we do have one question listed already, and it states, it seems obvious to us why we're applying to these jobs, for example, passion in the dairy industry, wanting to research dairy, etc. But how do we answer the why am I interested question properly?
It comes down to, look, a lot of people have passion for the dairy industry. It comes down to individual qualities that you bring into the position, in my mind. You know, it depends if it's extension or a research teaching position, but either way, you know, do you have a passion for discovery? I mean, you know, we all love dairy, and that's a given, but do you have a passion for discovery, for the science, for, you know, finding out things that nobody else has ever done? You know, it comes back to some of those other qualities, all right? So think of it from that perspective, because, you know, for me to get an answer that, well, I'm passionate about dairy, that doesn't mean that you're going to make a good faculty member, so to speak. Think of it a little bit deeper than that, okay? And, you know, myself, as an undergraduate, I got into a research project. So suddenly I realized I really love doing research. And, you know, the more I did that, the more I liked discovering new things, going into areas that no one else has looked at and trying to find answers. Or, you know, a passion for seeing people learn, whether it's an extension position or whether it's a teaching position at the university. Do you love being in a classroom? Do you love getting information out to individuals and seeing the light come on? So, you know, hopefully that gives you a little bit better idea of how to get at that question.
On a related note, just to tag off of that, do you think this would be a good opportunity to share kind of your knowledge about the position and why you think that, how your interest in research ties in with your interest in that specific position?
Oh, absolutely. You know, absolutely. You know, try to put yourself in that position. What do I bring to that position specifically, and how will that benefit the department, so to speak, but beyond that, then benefit the dairy industry? And again, this applies to teaching positions, research positions, or extension positions. But yeah, definitely address what they're looking for in that particular position. Hopefully the position description, you know, is not too generic for, you know, whatever you're applying for, but just say, here's what I think I can do.
Okay, awesome. Another question reads, what would you suggest as to when a graduate student should start looking for jobs and preparing for job interviews?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly in your last year, you need to be looking at positions pretty consistently to see what's out there. But as far as applying, if you're within about 6 months of applying, that's probably a good time to start getting applications out there. You could actually get applications out there before and let the institution or the company decide whether or not they want to wait, you know, 6 months down the road for you to finish up. I would say most of the faculty that we hired on were in fact finishing up their doctoral work, and you know, we probably waited 3-4 months in many cases for folks to wrap up, you know, have that degree in hand. But that means they applied several months before that. So 6 months before you're completing your degree is certainly not too early. And like I say, you know, if you find something of interest out there, you could apply before that. Just make it clear and make it realistic as to what your completion date really is. What you don't want to do is put a completion date on your, you know, in your resume and then come to find out, well, it's probably going to be 3 or 4 months later than that. You know, that might be a bit discouraging.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We have another question that's asking if you could comment on preparing for a postdoctoral position and the interviewing process that will entail.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. I thought about that in the process. It's just this is pretty broad, so I didn't get into that specifically. Again, for postdoctoral positions, you should start looking for those probably at least 6 months before you're finishing up. And you know, through your graduate career, you can be looking at these potential positions out there just to see what's available. The process, as far as resume goes, is going to be the same, okay? And most postdoctoral positions are going to be, you know, 100% research emphasis, intense research emphasis, and producing publications, all right? You may have an opportunity, the good thing is you may have an opportunity to actually write grants during a postdoc, which helps you then when you're looking at faculty positions, if in fact you were successful at getting grant dollars as postdoc. The interview process itself can be much abbreviated. It's not unusual to have, first of all, they may contact you by email and say, let's have a conference call. And after the conference call, you may go to a video conference, or you may have, depending on where you're located as opposed to, you know, where the position is, they may actually, you know, have you come to the site to interview and, you know, go through a more formal process with, you know, with a seminar. But a lot of times, you know, it's done over the phone and video conferencing today. You may not necessarily get a live interview or an on-site interview. But as far as the resume goes, everything still applies. And as far as negotiating, there's likely not any negotiation as far as what salary, you know, their salary is pretty much set because they're paying off of grant dollars. So it's going to be much abbreviated, but the preparation still needs to be somewhat similar.
All right, thank you for that. A related question from another student asks if after a PhD, do you think a postdoc is necessary to get a faculty position? There seems to be several schools of thought on this.
You're absolutely right. If you talk to 3 people, you get 3 different answers. It depends on the, to me, on the research intensity for the faculty position involved. I don't ever believe a postdoc hurts a person, okay? Let me start by saying that. I think I did a postdoc at Virginia Tech before I went on faculty, and I felt it was very helpful to me. And from an experience standpoint, I think it's helpful to most individuals. I don't think a postdoc is ever a waste, so to speak. It helps you get into an intense research environment usually, and some faculty positions, the search committee is looking for postdoctoral experience because, again, it gives you an opportunity. You started to build your publication numbers, you've got more intensive research experience, and you may have had a chance to go to do some grant writing during the postdoc experience. And what I would say is if you do go the postdoc route, I would encourage you to try to get some grant writing experience because that will definitely be of benefit when you're considered for a faculty position later on. You know, I don't think it's an all or none type of thing. we've hired people with and without, and both have been successful. But I do feel if you have a research agenda in mind for your career, a postdoc can give you some added benefit.
All right, thank you for that insight. Again, if anyone has any further questions, please go ahead and type them below. But while I wait for any more, I'll just ask a question about kind of the format of a faculty interview. You mentioned it's a couple days long, and from what I've heard, it also involves some more casual settings, for example, a dinner. And
Absolutely.
So my question was, how do you act in the more casual settings? For example, at dinner, how do you order your food and still be respectful? Do you order alcohol? How do you interact with your to-be coworkers? Things like that.
Sure. That's a very good question. And first, I'll answer that first by prefacing it by saying, when we brought in faculty candidates, I always had breakfast the first morning with the candidate. Okay? And you talk about first impressions. By the time breakfast was over, I had my first impression. I think it's fine when you go out to dinner with faculty and so forth. I think it's fine to be more casual. In other words, dress can be more casual and so forth. If you're in question, you ask them. And it's wonderful to have kind of everyday conversations on, what are your hobbies and so forth. But again, I caution you as try to keep it professional. In other words, keep the language in check, keep the jokes in check, enjoy yourself, and have the casual conversation with them, but with a professional edge, if you know what I mean. I think those can be very enjoyable times, and you find out a lot, about, personally about the faculty members that you may be working with, and about, how they view the university and that type of thing. It's also a time maybe to have some of those more casual questions. Again, not salary, not benefits, but some of the more casual conversations about, well, what do you think about the departmental culture, and how do you interact with your colleagues, and what do you enjoy most about being a faculty member? That's an opportunity for those types of things. The alcohol thing, I have mixed emotions about. If others are ordering alcohol, I guess I would reserve it to one drink, and feel comfortable with ordering alcohol. But I guess that's the only statement I have about that.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are two more questions. If we have time, I'll get to both of them, but let me go ahead and ask the one. It asks, what's the best way to figure out what you should ask for a startup package? I've heard of set standards in some positions, whereas others ask for 200% over the initial offer and get it.
Okay, it depends on the position. Again, on the startup package, what I typically did is I ask the candidate, will you put together your equipment list, okay? Because I needed to know what they really need that did not already exist there. So if you want to go about it in that way, I think that's fine. And there's two schools of thought. You be conservative, but most of my faculty would say you ask for as much as you can up front because that's your only opportunity. And there's some truth to that, but an overwhelmingly large request sometimes can be very discouraging for the institution that you're working with. In our case, we could make no offer to a candidate without the dean's approval. So in our case, we were regulated by how much we could offer. I would say if you can justify the need, put the list together and say, this is ideally what I would need to be successful, and let the chips fall where they may. there's another line of thought too, that you don't get what you don't ask for. Okay, so keep it professional in whatever way you go about, but I would say you better be able to justify what you're asking for if you're going to go for the 200% above what's logical. Okay?
That makes sense, yes. All right, and we will squeeze one final question in there. Someone asked if, as the department chair, do you prefer faculty who have more of a broad research interest or more focused, and if that should impact how you choose a postdoctoral position and if it should be different from your current research area?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's a little bit difficult to answer because to me it would depend on the specific position at the institution and what they want you to do. If you're an extension person, for example, with a research expectation, some broader interest might be advantageous in that, you know, you could do research across several different areas and meet the expectations of the institution and have an impact on your industry. You know, again, it depends on how you define broad. You know, if we're hiring a reproductive physiologist, for example, and we have some kind of an idea of the need out in our industry, then we would look for the person maybe with that specific expertise in that need area. From a grantsmanship standpoint, if you get yourself too narrow, they may not be funding grants that are in your specific area. This comes back kind of to the flexibility idea that we had. You probably need to have 2 or 3 kind of directions, so to speak, in a research program and not put all your apples in one basket because, you know, funding is really fickle, and especially, you know, funding at the federal level. And frankly, you got to be able to funnel grant proposals in the general area which they're saying that they'll fund grants. So in some respects, you know, funding drives you to a great deal today. But being too focused could be a disadvantage, again, because maybe nobody wants to fund that specific an area, but you don't necessarily want to be a generalist, so to speak. So I would say, you know, if you had a 2 or 3 pronged approach to your research program, so there may be a broader funding opportunity, and if you feel you're very narrow, to get back to the postdoc part of the question, if you feel that you're very, very narrow in your research emphasis by the time you're finishing up your PhD, then a postdoc opportunity may help you to broaden that a little bit, broaden your expertise.